The materials that I use are largely ready-made. Fundamental to my practice is how can something be something else? And that's enriched by a couple of things, or a few things. One is the genetics is lots of artists from my mother's side, and my father's Navy and ships. So I grew up on battleships, running around as a kid, looking at all this junk. We were very poor. My mother was sort of very artistic. So my life was making do. You know, we made beds out of doors. We were always turning something into something else. But the motorbikes were a more recent thing where I was going, I'm sick of things having so much memory. Let's just take brand new things and throw them about a bit. These things that emerge just make my imagination go. I look at them and I go, cities should look like that. The main three preoccupations I have at the moment also align with the scales at which I work. So I have a preoccupation about my work in the gallery, a preoccupation about how I adapt and change architecture, and a preoccupation about how to be effective within the city to make those adaptations how cities grow. At the scale of the parasitic, how I transform existing architecture, because that's my project as artist-architect. How can you think of the city, the building as a body, as a sort of an organism that is now unhealthy and needs to change? Because the most sustainable thing that we can do in the future is to simply adapt and change existing stuff. Don't pull it down, it stores carbon. Put new tops on it, link it to other buildings. This is the whole idea. How do we make this dynamic mix? And to that end, I've written recently, on top of my book, Architecture, Porosity, the Architecture of Imagination, I've published a typology of parasitism, which is called coral. So the vision for the future is the city as a coral reef. How do we get involved? How do we transform existing structures? How do we step beyond their boundaries into public space? How do we three-dimensionalise public space? So to that end, I built a number of parasites, but mostly I end up having to be in court to do them. And because they step beyond boundaries usually, they sort of go a bit higher, a bit deeper. The city, I think now because I've hit a certain age, I'm realising that my dream of the coral reef city and doing many projects in it is perhaps over, and my most effective stance will be to write a book and to continue to build models. So my government research enables me with assistance to build city models, to model them virtually as well as physically, and to start to dream connections, possible projects that three-dimensionalise public space. In this part of the city, which is the World Square, I've let myself sort of go berserk with the parasitic structures. So what's interesting about these structures is that they are, in fact, where they might do some good. So we analyse what's going on in these buildings. We actually invade them. We take notes. We work out where we might put things, where the linkages are going to sort of do the most good. But the main thing about this one is just to show a vision of what the city might become. And as you can see, as things get more complex, and they use geometries which are beyond some simplistic functionalism, then the whole thing becomes a sort of a blurry mass. It does become this coral reef that I've been talking about. But in the future, far into the future, who knows what sort of machines we're going to need. This is a cap on a building which is very sort of expressive and beautiful. Other parts are farms. You can see cranes and things enabling certain things. We dream vertical farms, we dream energy systems, you name it. So it's kind of sci-fi. I spent a lot of time in China and India in order to study slums in order to see how social construction and architecture need to mix. So I'm very political about this. It's extremely important that architects and artists have a political position. My position is quite clear. I'm not a complete Marxist, but I believe in social democracy. I believe in the welfare state. I believe in having a market, but having to endlessly craft it through legislation, to restrict it, to mould it through text first, and that means being political. But how to effectively be political, God only knows. I don't think you continue to do things, especially at the rate that I do, without being an optimist. I'm a firm believer in our agility and ability to solve problems. If people want to come in there and really challenge the city, you've got to let that happen. I'm interested in Occupy, and I've actually written some essays about Occupy, and I think one of its great failings is that if it was nomadic, it might be effective. I felt like writing to the guys in Hong Kong and saying, look, just keep massing, but keep moving. I invented chiastic space. It's a crossover space. It means that there are types of public space inside private space, and they can tell us what a city might do next. If there are vast areas where, in other words, it's unoccupied and you can pass into it and through it and it's desirable, then it's telling us that the city might use these spaces to create a new ground plane at another level, to make linkages between buildings like they're doing around the world, but quicker. Beijing, where I go virtually every year, they're already starting to build buildings like Stephen Hull's linkage between, I think, about 6 towers in Beijing. Admittedly, it's one owner between those, but they still had to link, which means crossing boundaries and valuing having that interlinking at another level. So that's one good example. Here's the thing. It's a tale of two cities, right? In Melbourne, a number of years ago, back I think in the Kennett government decided that it would speak to the intelligentsia of architecture and urban planning, RMIT. University, in a nutshell, says good design makes money. Good design is all you need. Have competitions where the people who win them get to build and get a diversity of languages and just go for excellence. Okay, that's it. Sydney, government only speaks to developers. This is the beginning and the end of the corruption. Barangaroo is a shining example. Two things wrong: no infrastructure, no subway that we've already planned, no metro. And developers are allowed to come in and make suggestions and sort of enact buildings out of nowhere. This is my Joseph Kindrich trolley. It's very old, actually. This was built in 1979, and I'm going to use it in a performance again. Joseph Kindrich mapped the city as a homeless person for many years with this trolley. And to me, he was always like my doppelganger, like the other of the city. And through him, I'm going to make a critical public artwork by placing a model of the new casino, polished stainless steel model of the new casino here. And rather than make comment, he will travel around the city with two things. He'll be the conscience of the city, basically. He'll have the surveyor's staff, and for one day a week, I'll push this around the route that he walked between Barangaroo and Town Hall in the park. And the whole idea is, it just begs the question, really. People will think, what's this about? But people who are old enough will remember him. They'll see me in the black suit being him, and then they'll see some sort of future prediction. So yes, I'm teaching subversion by giving people permission to act with their bodies first, because part of my main thesis is, and this is how I became to be a professor, is to go out and look, use your body, infiltrate, see for yourself. It's like space junk. The little space house module is prejudicing the machine to get it there, and the body has to fit and make do. That is what I love.